everyone, my name is Kristen and this video is going to be a little bit different than my two other videos. It's currently about 3 a.m. and I can't sleep, so I figured I would bring you along with me as I read a new book. This isn't exactly ASMR, it's just supposed to be like, I want to be, if you're having trouble sleeping or just need someone to listen to and zone out, I want to be kind of like Scooter in the Sleep With Me podcast. He says he's your friend in the darkness. Sorry, itchy nose. So, I want to be your friend. I want to be someone who you can listen to and just relax. So let's get started. The book we're going to be reading is The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. This is a very old copy of this. I believe the copyright is 1965. So the pages are very yellow and the print is very old. But I'm gonna read as far as my phone will let me record with the storage that I have. So let's get started. Book 1, Chapter 1, The Great Hall. It is 348 years, 6 months, and 19 days ago today that the citizens of Paris were awakened by the pealing of all the bells in the triple precincts of the city, the university, and the town. Yet the 6th of January, 1482, is not a day preserved in history. There was nothing remarkable about the event which, so early in the morning, thus set in motion the bells and the good people of Paris. It was neither a Picardian nor Burgundian assault, nor a reliquary carried in procession, nor a students' revolt, nor an entry of our most honored lord, Monsieur the King, nor even a good hanging of thieves, male or female, in front of the Palace of Justice. Neither was it the sudden arrival, so frequent in the 15th century, of some bedizened and befeathered ambassador. Scarcely 2 days had elapsed since the last cavalcade of this sort, that of the Flemish envoys commissioned to conclude the marriage treaty between the Dauphin and Margaret of Flanders, had entered Paris, to the great annoyance of the Cardinal of Bourbon, who, in order to please the king, had been obliged to give a gracious reception to those rude Flemish burgomasters, and to entertain them at his Hotel de Bourbon, with a very fine morality play, comedy, and farce, while a driving rain drenched the magnificent tapestry at his door. That has to be one of the longest sentences I think I've ever read. Oh my goodness. But on the 6th of January, what had bestirred the whole population of Paris, as Jean de Troyes phrases it, was the joint observance, as from time immemorial, of the Day of the Kings and the Feast of Fools. On that day there would be bonfires in the Place de Grève, a maypole would be planted at the Chapel of Broc, and a mystery play would be performed at the Palace of Justice. These events had been proclaimed the day before by trumpets blown at all street corners by the provost's men, dressed in fine actons of purple camlet, with large white crosses on the breast. Crowds of people accordingly wended their way in the morning from all parts of the town, leaving their houses and shops closed, toward one of the 3 above-mentioned places. Each had made his choice. It must be noted, however, in appreciation of the usual good sense of the lower class of Paris, that most of these people directed their steps toward the bonfire, which was perfectly seasonable, or toward the mystery play, which was to be performed in the great hall of the palace, well covered and sheltered, and that all wisely agreed to let the poor ill-dressed maypole shiver all alone under the January sky in the cemetery of the Chapel of Broc. People swarmed especially in the avenues of the Palace of Justice, because it was known that the Flemish ambassadors, who had arrived 2 days before, planned to attend the mystery play and to assist at the election of the Pope of Fools, which was likewise to take place in the great hall. On this day, it was no easy matter for one to get into this great hall, although it was then reputed to be the largest single enclosure in the world. It is true that Sauval had not measured the great hall of the castle of Montargis. The square in front of the palace, thronged with people, presented to the gazers from the windows the appearance of a sea, into which 5 or 6 streets, like the mouths of so many rivers, were emptying at every moment new waves of human heads. The waves, ever swelling, broke against the corners of the houses, which projected here and there, like so many promontories, into the irregularly shaped basin of the square. In the center of the high Gothic facade of the palace, the long flight of stone steps was incessantly ascended and descended by a double stream of people, which, after being broken by a landing, spread its broad waves over 2 lateral declivities, and continuously poured a stream into the square, like a cascade into a lake. The shouts, the loud laughter, the scuffing of those thousands of feet, made altogether a great noise and clamor. From time to time this racket redoubled, the stream which carried all this crowd towards the stone steps was turned back, became disturbed, and was thrown into an eddy. This was caused by some lancer's thrust, or by the horse of one of the provost's sergeants prancing about to establish order. This admirable maneuver the provosts bequeathed to the constables to the marshals, and the marshals to our gendarmes of Paris. Doors, windows, and roofs swarmed with thousands of happy bourgeois, looking calmly yet soberly at the palace or at the crowd, and desiring to do nothing more, for most of the good people of Paris are quite content with the spectacle of spectators. Indeed, even a wall behind which something is happening is to us an object of interest. If it could be given to us mortals of 1830 to mingle in imagination with those Parisians of the 15th century and, jostled, elbowed, and squeezed by them, to enter that immense hall of the palace, which was really too small on that 6th of January, 1482, the spectacle would not be without interest or charm. For we should find around us things so ancient that they would appear completely new. With the reader's kind permission, we shall endeavor to create in his mind's eye the impression he would have had when crossing with us the threshold of that great hall, among that motley throng in surcoat, acton, and cotehardie. I don't know French. First of all, our ears are ringing with the din. Our eyes are dazzled by what we see. Above us is a double-ribbed vault, paneled with carved wood, painted azure, and sprinkled with golden fleur-de-lis. Under our feet is a marble pavement of black and white squares. A few paces from us rises an enormous pillar, then another, then another. In all, 7 down the length of the hall, supporting, in a central line, the springing of the double vault. Around the first 4 pillars are shops or stalls, all glittering with glass and jewelry. Around the last 3 are oaken benches, worn and polished by the pleader's breeches and the attorney's robes. Around the hall, along its lofty walls, between the doors, between the windows, between the pillars, we see innumerable statues of all the kings of France since Pharamond, the do-nothing kings with downcast eyes and arms hanging limply, the valiant and warlike kings with heads and hands raised boldly toward heaven. We see glowing in the long-pointed windows stained glass of 1,000 colors. At the high entrances to the hall are rich doors, finely carved, the whole interior, vaults, pillars, walls, cornices, paneling, doors, and statues, is splendidly painted with blue and gold, which, already a little tarnished at the period in which we see it, has almost entirely disappeared under dust and cobwebs, in the year of grace 1549, when Dubreuil still admired it through written accounts. Sorry, that was gross. Now just imagine that immense oblong hall, poorly lit by the dim light of a January day, stormed by a motley and noisy throng of people, pouring in along the walls and circling the 7 pillars, and you will have immediately the whole picture, of which we will endeavor to point out more precisely the curious details. It is certain that if Ravaillac had not assassinated Henry IV, there would have been no documents about the trial of Ravaillac recorded in the registry of the Palace of Justice. No accomplices interested in causing the disappearance of said documents, and consequently no incendiaries obliged, for want of any better expedient, to burn the registry in order to burn the documents, and to burn the Palace of Justice in order to burn the registry. In short, no fire of 1618. The old palace would still be standing with its great hall, and I could say to the reader, "Go see it," and thus we would both be spared trouble, myself the trouble of writing, and him that of perusing such a description. All of which proves this very novel truth, that great events have incalculable consequences. It is quite possible that Ravaillac accomplices had nothing at all to do with the fire of 1618. We have 2 other very plausible explanations. The first is the great fiery star, a foot wide and a foot and a half high, which fell, as everyone knows, from the sky right upon the palace, just after midnight on the 7th of March. Second is this quatrain of Theophile's. Indeed, it was a sorry sport, when in Paris Dame Justice, for having eaten too much spice, set fire to the palace. Whatever you may think of these 3 explanations, political, physical, and poetical, concerning the conflagration of the Palace of Justice in 1618, it is unfortunately a certain fact that there was a fire. Because of that catastrophe, and moreover because of the many successive restorations, there now remains very little of the original residence of the kings of France, of that palace which was the elder sister of the Louvre, and so ancient even in the time of Philippe le Bel, that it was difficult to discover any traces of the magnificent building erected there by King Robert, and described by Helgaldus? These names, man, I can't. Nearly all has disappeared. What has become of the chancery chamber where St. Louis consummated his marriage? What of the garden where he administered justice, clad in a tunic of camlet, a sleeveless surcoat of linsey-woolsey, and over that a mantle of black sendal, lying upon carpets reading his Joinville? Where is the chamber of the Emperor Sigismund? That of Charles IV? That of Jean Santerre? Where is the staircase from which Charles IV read his Edict of Pardon? Where is the flagstone on which Marcel, in the presence of the Dauphin, cut the throats of Robert de Clermont and Marshal de Champagne? Where is the wicket at which the papal bulls of the anti-pope Benedict were torn, and through which those who had brought them there were led, coped, and mitred in derision, thus doing public penance through all of Paris? And where is the great hall itself, with its gilding, its azure, its pointed arches, its statuary, its pillars, its immense vaults, all decorated with carving? Where is the gilded chamber, and the stone lion which stood at its doorway, with its head bowed and its tail between its legs, like the lions about King Solomon's throne, in a posture of humiliation appropriate to strength in the presence of justice? Where are the beautiful doors, and the stained-glass windows, and the wrought-iron work, the perfection of which discouraged Biscornet, and the delicate cabinet-work of Du Hancy? What has time, what has man done with all of those wonders? What has been given to us in exchange for all that Gaulish history, for all that Gothic art? In art we now have the heavy, lowering arches of Monsieur de Brosse, the awkward architect for the porch of Saint Gervais, and for history we have the prattling reminiscences of the Great Pillar, still resounding with the gossip of Petrusus. That isn't much to boast about. But let us go back to the real Great Hall of the real Palace of Justice. At one end of this huge parallelogram was the famous marble table, so long, so wide, so thick, that say the old territorial records in a style which might have whet even Gargantua's appetite. Never was there seen such a slab of marble in the world. At the other end was the chapel in which Louis XI, I think, posted for a statue in which he was kneeling in front of the Virgin. Also to this place he had transferred, indifferent to the fact that thereby two niches were left empty in the line of royal statues, those of Charlemagne and St. Louis, two saints whom, having been kings of France, he supposed to be very influential in heaven. This chapel, only 6 years old, had been built in that charming style of delicate architecture, with its marvelous stonework, its bold yet exquisite tracery, in which France marked the end of the Gothic period, and which prevailed until about the middle of the 16th century in the fairy fantasies of the Renaissance. The little rose-shaped window above the door was in particular a masterpiece of grace and lightness. Its frame and sash had almost the airiness of lace. In the middle of the hall, opposite the big door, there had been erected, for the convenience of the Flemish envoys and other great personages invited to the performance of the mystery play, a gallery canopied with gold brocade. This raised surface was fixed against the wall. A private entrance to it had been contrived by means of a window from the gilded chamber. It was upon the marble table, according to the custom, that the mystery was to take place. Preparations for this had been readying since early morning. On the rich marble floor, marred by the heels of law clerks, stood a high wooden structure, the upper floor of which, visible from every part of the hall, was to serve as a stage, while its interior, hung round with draperies, was to serve as the actors' dressing room. A ladder placed outside in full view of the audience formed the connecting link between stage and dressing room, serving also for entrances and exits. There was no character, however unexpected, no change of scene, no stage effect, which was not obliged to mount this ladder. O innocent and venerable infancy of art and machinery! 4 sergeants of the bailiff of the palace, the appointed guardians of all popular amusements, whether festivals or executions, stood on duty at the 4 corners of the marble table. I'm worried my phone's going to run out of storage, so I think I'll bookmark it there. If you want this to become a series, I guess, let me know. I can hopefully I've helped you in some way, whether that be a calming voice to listen to in the midst of an anxiety or a stress, or a calming voice to help you fall asleep, or simply a friend to be there in the night. So anyway, I hope you all sleep well, and good night.